more time. And it sharpened those folks up enough that Brian said he figured they did save some lives just because they practiced. So after he gave me all of that, I thought, you know, I think we can excuse you for one Sunday. No, I was glad to go ahead and be responsible for this morning. Plus, now, next Sunday, he will, I'm sure, unless something unforeseen happens, he will be here to do his part in the Sunday school classes. And the next Sunday after that will be who, I didn't look to see who, anybody here want to own up to this? Charles, okay, will be. So after that, me. In the meantime, we are doing 3 John. Anybody have anything to bring to that? Okay, 3 John. 3 John was written very close proximity to the time 2 John was written, and probably 1 John, and maybe even close to the gospel. The 4th book that John wrote, Revelation, was written a little bit later, only by a maximum of 5 years later, but a little bit. John had gotten into, we'll say he'd fallen into disfavor with the Roman government. All right, 3 John. Love. John looked at love as love cares about the individual, and love encourages, love rebukes, and love walks in the truth. All of that's here in this book. Well, 1 chapter, 15 verses. It's all here. He starts out with the elder to the beloved, and mentions who it's to. So there's a lot about love in this, and it's kind of the theme, or he uses it as a word or thought to encourage this man he's going to write to, and to those that he's with. Gaius, whom I love in truth. Now remember, in 1 John, it ended with John really getting into this of trying to express truth to people, and how important it was to go with the truth and to hang on to the truth. And he mentioned that again strongly in 2nd John and now 3rd John. This business of things that are true in a world that is basically false is so important to us. If we're going to have a foundation, it's got to be a foundation of truth. You can't build it on innuendos and falsehoods and lies, outright lies, or even half-truths. So he keeps mentioning this of truth. Now, in this book, we have 3 people that are talked about or talked to. First of all, the elder, this is John, the elder, to the beloved Gaius. That's the first guy. In a little bit, he's going to talk about the bad guy, Diotrephes. He's a jerk. Really, you don't want any Diotrepheses around you. And then he goes on to talk about the good guy, Demetrius. He was the good guy. All right. The elder to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in truth. Beloved, see, he's still trying to encourage this man. Say, we've got a closeness, and I want you to know that, and I really appreciate you. Yes, Ken?
Isn't this Gaius the same Gaius that John baptized in 1 Corinthians 1?
I don't know. It's a common name. And when you get common names, unless there's some way to really pin it down, I don't know. And he's one of the I don't knows. Is this the same one that John baptized earlier on? It's if I had to lean one way or another, I'd say, yeah, probably. Or possibly. Sure. So that would lend a reason for him to feel a closeness to him and want to encourage him. When you win someone to Christ, you want to see to it they stay that way. All right. Beloved, I pray that in all respects you may prosper and be in good health, just as your soul prospers. So do we tie these two together? If you're really a good Christian and you're a pillar in the church, you're going to be wealthy.
Amen.
Well, probably there are a few folks who could say, I don't see any reason to say that. Others would say, no. I can't tie one to the other. I have a lot of money. All right. I didn't used to. All right. You know, the whole thing is that he's not doing that, but he's saying that apparently this Gaius has a good, we'll say, financial cushion. But, and for John then to say, well, I want your soul to prosper also, that's just a good thing. And he said, all right, you've done well this way, but may your soul also be taken care of well and have a good spiritual cushion. And that's good. It's fine. It's just, see, this is a personal letter. And John probably couldn't write the things he writes here to just anyone, or maybe no one else. But here he does say this to him. And it's a good thing for our souls to prosper. We want that. And I think that's basically what John's trying to say. I want your soul to prosper. Sure. Ed?
Well, I have a note in my Bible from another for your health and wealth equal to how you care for your soul.
All right. Okay, yeah. That's a good thought. The way I take care of my soul, do I want to be that way financially? Good question. Good to ask oneself. Then he goes on, for I was very glad when brethren came to me and testified to your truth, that is, how you are walking in truth. This is a truthful man. This is a solid man. This is a man who spiritually and in the things of God, he is walking in the truth. And so when he has said in the verse just previous to, verse 2, with the verse 3 put in there, then you know what John is saying. You're doing so well spiritually, sure, go ahead and do that way physically, monetarily. It's all right. But he knew, John did, and is encouraging Gaius to be walking in things that are good and right. Apparently, in both peoples that John has written to, there were those that didn't walk in truth. You know, you sometimes have to encourage someone in an area or a group of people in some certain things because it's either around them there is a problem with this, or with them themselves there may be a problem with this. Now, John's going to be involved in writing 7 letters to 7 churches, and it's so said, and names the churches here in Revelation. And in there, those people, some of the churches were encouraged. Boy, you're really doing good in this. The very first one, he talks about how good they were in Ephesus, but, and of course, you know, when someone's talking to you, they say, but, forget what they said and listen to what they're going to say. And you have left your first love in Ephesus. And ooh. So John is going to write letters, but of course, those letters were given to him of God directly to write. But still, he's turned out to be quite a letter writer. Here, I was glad when the testimony for your life was one of you're walking in the truth. You're doing it just right. I agree and testify that way. Verse 4, I have no greater joy than this, to hear of my children walking in the truth. You're doing it right. And are walking, that's a continued action. They're doing it, they've been doing it, they're going to keep doing it as far as he can tell. And you're walking in the truth. That's the path you're on. It's sometimes called the straight and narrow, but that's the path. So 1, 2, 3, 4 times right here so far in 4 verses we've got truth. Has John considered it important? He certainly has. Truth. And this of loved and be loved, there's 1, 2 times he's already talked about that, and he's going to do it yet the more. Okay, greater joy. What makes you happy? I mean, not happy. What makes you joyful? And I'd make a differentiation there. Happy can be, I don't know, one seems to me to be a little more longer term, and the other is more of a bubble. But what brings you joy? People need to consider that. We do. What brings me joy? What makes me joyful, full of joy, and so on. Yeah. One way you can find out, what do I pursue? What do I try to do? What makes me joyful? Yesterday, we worked with our daughter-in-law. You understand the story there. With her mother, who passed away, we worked with the estate sale. And everything that woman had that was left in the house, Tiffany was responsible for selling. What made that woman joyful? Well, you get a chance to see what's been collected. Quality. She wanted quality. Some of the things that went out of that house were the best you could buy at yard sale prices. Solomon talks about that in Ecclesiastes. All is vanity. No matter how much you've gotten, when you're gone, it's gone. Anyway, it's quality. And I think she lived alone. And I think that when she wanted to treat herself, what did she do? It looks like she went out and bought gadgets. She liked gadgets. I like gadgets. Boy, there's a lot of intriguing stuff there. But a lot of it was in the kitchen. Yeah. I mean, how many different kinds of slicers you can have, you know? Peelers. I saw 4 kinds of peelers. Never seen some of them. Anyway, what makes you joyful? How do you treat yourself when you want to be special to yourself? What do you do? With John, I have no greater joy. That's verse 4. Verse 3, I was very glad. Glad can be a little longer term, but joy is right in there with it. I have no greater joy than this, to hear my children walking in the truth, to hear other brothers and sisters whom I worship with and whom I appreciate in the church, staying faithful, being truthful. No greater joy. Yeah. Beloved, again, 3rd time. You are acting faithfully in whatever you accomplish for the brethren, and especially when they are strangers. So he talks in verse 4, no greater joy than this, to hear my children walking in the truth. And now he explains an aspect of that. You're acting faithfully, and this makes me joyful. And the way you act faithfully is what you accomplish for the brethren, not for yourself, for the brethren, and especially when they're strangers. What's he talking about, strangers? Do we have any strangers? There sits Ivan over there. Many of you may not know Ivan. And anybody that rides 100 miles an hour downhill on a bicycle is strange. Anyway, strangers. Now with this, it tells us who they are. And they have testified to your love before the church. You will do well to send them on their way. What, you don't want to keep strangers around? Okay, you're here, but you've been here long enough. Now you go. No. Send them on their way in a manner worthy of God. There were people that went around and they preached and they taught. They were Christians and they did this. And they would be in different churches. In this country, century and a half or so ago, we had circuit riding preachers. And in areas where we just didn't have the transportation we do now, or the communication we do now, they had to travel. Well, that's what was going on here. They went from church to church, and they spread the good news. And as they went, they, like Paul, he was spreading the good news, starting churches, and getting them stabilized. These people would come, all right? Now, to hear my children walking in the truth, beloved, you're acting faithfully in whatever you accomplish for the brethren, and especially when these people come in. They didn't have motels. They didn't have restaurants. They didn't have ways to maintain themselves as we do today. So they had to depend on the church people when they went to a church to preach to them or to work with them or whatever. So especially when they were strangers, not strangers to the faith, but simply to that congregation. So I'm so happy when I see that you're doing this. And your congregation here, wherever Gaius was. And these who were strangers, the travelers, they have testified to your love before the church. Apparently where John was, or where he could at least be aware of their testimony. Boy, when you go to that congregation, you preach to them, they'll treat you so well. And this was the testimony. You, and he's encouraging them, you will do well to send them on their way in a manner worthy of God. Yeah. They come, they preach to you, they teach, they work with the church or help or encourage or whatever they're doing. Then as they go, you sure don't want to send them out the door. Well, bye, sure hope you make it. No, you take care of them, whatever their needs are. And John could say, this is so good. And here's why, a part of why we're saying what we just said about these traveling people. For they went out for the sake of the name. Name is capitalized in my version. That tells me this is deity. The name. And I looked it up in a Jewish Bible. And there's it's a certain word they used for that, and it meant God. So the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. I wouldn't take anything from a Gentile. The Jewish Bible says goim. I mean, not a good word. But that isn't the connotation here. They just simply, they didn't have to depend on those that were outside the Lord, outside the church. And in a Jew's mind, John was, he understood what he's talking about here with this. So with this, they went out for the sake of the Lord and the Lord's church. And they didn't go out having to go to an agency or to a this or a that, or any group of people that weren't a part of the church. They didn't have to do that. The church took care of them. And it worked apparently here because of the testimony that came back to John. They went out for the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. Now, it wasn't as though the Gentiles wouldn't have helped them. That's not the point that he's making. Gentiles, yes or no. They weren't asked. They weren't depended on. They weren't involved in this. As far as the care and so forth is concerned. It seems to me that as people became Christian, they were just part of the church then. It had been written, it was in Scripture by the time this was written, that there weren't Jews and Gentiles in the spiritual realm. Physical realm, well, sure. Therefore, we ought to support such men, these that are traveling, so that we may be fellow workers with the truth. These men are traveling about, and they are spreading the truth. And as we help them, we are spreading the truth. And we do this somewhat today when we send a faithful, godly, Christian man or woman and woman to another field other than right here, and we are supporting them. We give them a name, a title, or it's not really a title, it's just more of a description. We call them missionaries. That means, the word means a person on a mission. They have a project. We could use different terms, but we've chosen missionaries, and it fits. They have a mission to do. And so, we ought to support such men, so that we may be fellow workers. As they teach the truth, so are we teaching the truth. So if they don't teach the truth, well, then it's off. But let's not go there. Let's just look at it positively, because that's the way John is doing it. So they went out for the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. Therefore, we ought to support such men, so that we may be fellow workers with the truth. So he keeps mentioning this truth, and he is really stuck on it. And I really like that, because it's so easy to get away from. Yeah. Last Sunday, there was a fellow baptized up near between Alturas and Likely, if you have any idea where any of those places are. Anyway, this was, he's one of the guys that's been for years on this car tour that I was on last week. And he was converted by Rodney Flournoy and others, and taught by some others besides. And he was baptized in a real interesting baptistry. Real interesting. It was huge. Yeah, almost as big as this room. And it had a water faucet that was about yay big around. The pipe came out of it, and the water went straight out about this far before it even bent, at 87 degrees. If you've been baptized here, you would say, "Oh, couldn't we do that?" This water has never been to 87 degrees. Take the 80 off. Whoa. Yeah, you got any? Yeah, sure. I thought it was colder than that. Yeah. Anyway, these, you know, there are things that happen, and the way things are done that are so good in the way that they're done. The truth was taught up there, and the truth was followed. He was immersed into Christ for the remission of his sins. It was. Anyway, see, people go, and if you can just support the truth, then the truth will win in the lives of people. That's what he started out this book talking about. All right, on to the next one. That's the good part. Okay, now we get to this jerk. I wrote something to the church. John did, apparently before. We have no concept what it was because we don't have that letter. But I wrote something to the church. But Diotrephes, who loves to be the first among them. In some versions, I think King James, loves the preeminence. And there are some religious organizations that like to have individuals called your eminence. Oh, pooey. Diotrephes, who loves to be the first among them, does not accept what we say. I mean, who am I, John could be saying? I'm just an apostle of Jesus Christ. But he doesn't pull rank, as it were, at all. He just says, I wrote a letter, but this guy chose not to believe it. Does not accept what we say. For this reason, if I come, I will call attention to his deeds, which he does. We'll take care of the matter. Unjustly, this is what he does. He unjustly accuses us with wicked words. And not satisfied with this, he himself does not receive the brethren, these people who traveled. He doesn't accept them. He forbids those who desire to do so, to accept them. And he puts them out of the church. I look at it this way. You know, I really would not want to be in that man's shoes, if they wear them in heaven, before the judgment seat of God. I would not want to stand and answer for him. Because of the way God's man, the Apostle John, wrote about him. So he not only says accusatory words that are wicked about John. Of course, whenever you want to belittle somebody, you attack them personally. The fellow that they're looking at to be one of the next Supreme Court people, and there are a certain group that doesn't want him there. So what did they do? Or what's the big deal today? An accusation of sexual impropriety. Oh, let's just use that one. And they looked and they looked and they looked. They finally had to make something up about his high school years. That makes about as much sense as this does of accusing John the Apostle with wicked words, and then going on. If one of these traveling people come to teach and to work and to help the church, Diotrephes didn't like it, and if you liked it and you wanted it and Diotrephes didn't, he'd kick you out of the church. This guy is really out of line. Verse 11, Beloved, do not imitate what's evil. Don't be like Diotrephes. Don't imitate what's evil, but what is good. The one who does good is of God. The one who does evil has not seen God. And way back in 1 John, in the 3rd chapter, verses 6 and a couple after that, he says the very same thing. So don't imitate what's evil. And we're good at being imitators. We see someone do something and we tend to pick it up. Well, before I went to Bible college, I worked on a construction job, and sometimes construction people don't speak well. I mean, it's very clearly and easily understood what the words are, but they're, you know, an Englishman ought to speak English, not French. Okay, and you tend to pick that up. And even those thoughts run through your head, you don't want them there. So don't imitate what's evil. Fight against it. If you're around it, fight against it. Don't let it in your head. But if you're going to do any imitating at all, imitate what's good. Pick that up. Okay, because that's from God, and the other is not from God. Demetrius, not Diotrephes. Demetrius has received a good testimony from everyone and from the truth itself. Now, maybe Demetrius almost makes me wonder if he's either one of the traveling ones or he was another pillar in the church that wanted right. I don't know which this is. Anyway, this Demetrius is a good guy. Received a good testimony from everyone and from the truth itself. And we add our testimony about Demetrius. He's a good guy. And you know that our testimony is true. If you believe me, then I'm telling you, Demetrius is a good guy. And he follows the truth. He loves the truth. And if John is writing this now and he's making this a personal you, see, Demetrius has received a good testimony from everyone and from the truth itself, and we add our testimony, and you know, now if that you is personal, it's Gaius again, that's who he's writing the letter to. And you, Gaius, you know that our testimony is true. So John he's putting his reputation on the line for Demetrius. If you believe me, then you know Demetrius is a good guy. And you listen to him and you follow after his way. All right, so we have the good guy that he's writing to, Gaius. He talks about this fellow Diotrephes, and John isn't one that he's given just, this is not gossip. It's not gossip. This is not talking out of turn or out of place. This is actual fact that he's ready and willing to come and assert his authority and the truthfulness that people know him for, and pin this guy Diotrephes, boy, skin him alive and pin his side to the wall, bloody side out. You know, he needed it. You don't want people like that in the church. Okay. I had many things to write to you, but I'm not willing to write them to you with pen and ink. Now, in 2 John, as we ended up there, verse 12, he talks about paper and ink. This is pen and ink. Any difference? Not really. But I hope to see you shortly, and we will speak face to face. Now, whether he's just planned the trip or what, I don't know. But that was his hope and his desire. But this letter is the forerunner to this trip. He ends it with peace to you, or peace be to you. The friends greet you. That's the people that apparently John was with. Greet the friends by name. Friends is not in capital, is not capitalized. The F is not capitalized. Why do I say that? Well, there is a religious group that say, well, that means that's what we're supposed to be called as Christians. We're supposed to be called friends, and that's a religious title, as it were. Who would they be? Do you know? Quakers. Okay, they're Quakers. Friends. The Friends Church. Okay, but that's not here. Now, I've got a few seconds left. When I come back, which will be after Brian and Charles have their say, so that's going to be a month before I'm back here. But I'll be in church every Sunday, Lord willing. I wanted to talk to you about this, but maybe we'll take up with that. And that tells us what materials did they use. Here it talks about pen and ink. There it was paper and ink. What materials did they use? There were several, and I was really interested in this, and that's all well and good, but I thought you might like to know what God used so that that material that they used would last as long as possible. One of the best that they had was leather. Okay, got to stop. Thank you so much for your attention. Here